Nobody expected the standoff that happened on Flight 304 to Denver. It was supposed to be a routine Tuesday departure. But when a senior flight attendant decided to target a single mother and her quiet son, she made a career-ending mistake. She thought she had all the power. She thought she could twist the rules to kick them off the plane. But she didn't know that the 10-year-old boy sitting in seat 12B wasn't just playing on his iPad. He was memorizing the rulebook. Watch closely, because when this boy opens his mouth and quotes the airline's own federal policy word for word, the silence in that cabin is deafening. This is the story of how a bully with a badge got a lesson in law, and the karma that followed was absolutely ruthless. The humidity in the jet bridge at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport was stifling, a sharp contrast to the overly air-conditioned chill of the terminal. Tanya gripped the handle of her carry-on bag until her knuckles turned white. She adjusted the strap of her purse, glancing down at her son, Leo. Leo was 10 years old, small for his age, with wide, observant eyes behind thick-rimmed glasses. He wasn't like other kids. While most 10-year-olds were glued to TikTok or fighting over Nintendo Switches, Leo had a fixation on systems, rules, how things worked. In his backpack, tucked safely between a bag of pretzels and a spare sweater, was a printed-out PDF of the Global Airways carriage contract and the FAA Passenger Bill of Rights. He had printed it at the library 3 days ago because he was nervous about flying for the first time since his father left. "You okay, baby?" Tanya whispered, brushing a piece of lint off his shoulder. She was wearing her best Sunday blazer, trying to look professional, trying to look like she belonged in Group 4. "I'm operating at 90% efficiency, Mum," Leo said, his voice serious. "The aircraft is a Boeing 737-800. Safe record." "That's my genius." She smiled, though her stomach was doing flip-flops. They stepped onto the plane. The air smelled of recycled coffee and industrial cleaner. Standing at the galley, greeting passengers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, was Patricia. Patricia had been flying with Global Airways for 22 years. She wore the navy blue uniform with a sharpness that felt weaponized. Her hair was sprayed into an immovable blonde helmet, and her name tag sat slightly askew. She wasn't just a flight attendant. In her mind, she was the sheriff of the sky. Today, however, Patricia was in a foul mood. Her transfer request to the international route to Paris had been denied that morning by HR, citing interpersonal complaints. She was looking for a reason to vent, and unfortunately, Tanya and Leo were walking right into the crosshairs. "Boarding pass!" Patricia snapped, not looking at Tanya, but over her shoulder at the line of businessmen behind her. Tanya held up her phone. "Right here. Seats 12A and 12B. Patricia scanned the phone, her lip curling slightly as the machine beeped. She looked Tanya up and down. Tanya was a beautiful black woman with natural hair tied back in a silk scarf. Patricia's gaze lingered on the carry-on bag Tanya was pulling. It was a soft shell roller, slightly worn, but clearly within regulations. "That bag looks heavy," Patricia said, her voice loud enough to make the passengers in row 1 and 2 look up. "It's fine," Tanya said politely. "It's just clothes." "We have a full flight today," Patricia announced, stepping into the aisle and effectively blocking Tanya's path. "Bin space is premium. You'll need to gate check that." Leo looked up, his brow furrowing. He tapped his leg rhythmically. "Ma'am," Tanya said, keeping her voice level. "I checked the sizer at the gate. It fits perfectly, and we are in Group 4. There is still plenty of space." She was right. The overhead bins above row 12 were wide open. Patricia's eyes narrowed. She didn't like being corrected, especially not by someone she deemed attitude-heavy. She leaned in, her perfume sickly sweet. I decide what fits and what doesn't on my aircraft. Leave the bag here, take your seat, or you don't fly." Tanya felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She knew this game. If she raised her voice, she was aggressive. If she refused, she was non-compliant. "Mum," Leo said softly. "Section 7, paragraph C regarding carry-on baggage allowance." "Hush, Leo," Tanya whispered. She looked Patricia in the eye. "I will place it under the seat in front of me if I have to, but I am keeping my bag." Patricia scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Fine. But if it sticks out 1 inch, it's gone." She stepped aside, pressing herself dramatically against the galley wall, as if Tanya were contagious. As they walked down the aisle, Tanya could feel Patricia's eyes boring into her back. She didn't know it yet, but the war had just begun. The cabin was filling up. People were shoving oversized hard-shell suitcases into bins, wrestling with winter coats and complaining about legroom. Tanya and Leo found their seats. Leo took the window, 12A, immediately pulling out his binder. Tanya sat in the middle, 12B. The aisle seat, 12C, was occupied by a man in a grey suit who was already asleep, or pretending to be. Tanya lifted her bag. It was effortless. She slid it into the overhead bin. It fit with room to spare. She closed the bin gently and sat down, letting out a long breath. "She doesn't like us," Leo stated matter-of-factly. "Don't worry about her, Leo. Just focus on the flight." 10 minutes passed. The boarding complete announcement hadn't come yet. Suddenly, the heavy click-clack of heels approached down the aisle. Patricia stopped at row 12. She didn't speak to Tanya. Instead, she reached up and aggressively popped open the bin Tanya had just closed. She began shifting bags around, slamming a heavy briefcase against Tanya's soft roller. "Whose is this?" Patricia demanded, pointing to Tanya's bag. "It's mine," Tanya said. "Is there a problem?" "It's taking up too much room. I have a platinum member in row 14 who needs space." Patricia grabbed the handle of Tanya's bag and yanked it down. The bag nearly hit the sleeping man in 12C. "Hey!" Tanya instinctively reached out. "Careful!" "I told you to check this," Patricia snapped, holding the bag hostage in the aisle. "You didn't listen. Now you're disrupting the boarding process." "I am sitting down with my seatbelt on," Tanya protested, her voice trembling slightly. "The bag fits. You just saw it fit." "It's a safety hazard," Patricia lied smoothly. She looked around at the other passengers, seeking validation. "We can't have unsecured luggage floating around because passengers refuse to follow instructions." A woman in 13C, an older lady with reading glasses named Mrs. Higgins, spoke up. "Actually, dear, her bag was fine. I watched her put it in. That gentleman's briefcase is twice the size." Patricia's head snapped toward Mrs. Higgins. "I didn't ask for your opinion, ma'am, unless you want your bag checked too." Mrs. Higgins clamped her mouth shut, shocked by the venom in the flight attendant's tone. Patricia turned back to Tanya. "I'm tagging this. It goes under the plane." "My medication is in there," Tanya lied, desperate to keep her property close. She didn't trust this woman with her belongings. "And my son's inhaler." "Then take them out. You have 10 seconds. Tanya unbuckled her seatbelt to stand up and retrieve the items. "Sit down," Patricia barked. "The seatbelt sign is on." "You just told me to take the medicine out," Tanya cried, exasperated. "You are becoming belligerent," Patricia said, a cold, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She had what she wanted, a reaction. "I've asked you to comply, and you are shouting at crew members." "I am not shouting," Tanya pleaded, looking at the passengers around her. "You are harassing me." "That's it," Patricia said, dropping the bag in the middle of the aisle, blocking the path for everyone else. She pulled a small phone from her apron pocket. "I'm calling the captain. We have a security threat in 12B. Leo, who had been silent this entire time, slowly closed his binder. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the red exit sign, then at Patricia. He checked his watch. "Mum," Leo said, his voice oddly calm amidst the chaos. "She's violating Code 44A of the Passenger Conduct Protocol regarding de-escalation. She's doing it on purpose." "Leo, please," Tanya sobbed quietly. "I'm not going to let her do this, Mum." The atmosphere on the plane shifted from annoyance to fear. The word security threat carries weight in an airport. Passengers in the back were craning their necks to see what was happening. The man in 12C was now wide awake, looking uncomfortable. "Look," the man in 12C said, raising his hands. "She really wasn't doing anything. The bag fits." "Sir, do not interfere, or you will be removed as well," Patricia warned. She was drunk on the authority. She felt untouchable. The plane doors were still open. She had the power to purge anyone she disliked. Patricia picked up the cabin interphone. "Captain, we have a situation in the main cabin. Disruptive passenger, refusing crew instructions, exhibiting aggressive behavior. I need authority to remove." She hung up and looked down at Tanya with a sneer. "Grab your things. Both of you, now." Tanya didn't move. She was frozen in humiliation. Tears streamed down her face. "I paid for these tickets. We are going to my sister's wedding. Please, just let us fly." "You forfeited your right to fly when you raised your voice at me," Patricia said loudly, performing for the audience. "Get off my plane." "No," Tanya whispered. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I haven't done anything wrong." Patricia's face turned a blotchy red. She wasn't used to defiance. She marched to the front of the plane and signaled to the gate agent standing in the jet bridge. 2 minutes later, a large man in a neon vest and a corporate lanyard walked onto the plane. He wasn't police, but he was a gate supervisor. His name tag read Gary. "What's the problem here, Patricia?" Gary asked, looking tired. "She assaulted me verbally," Patricia lied, pointing a manicured finger at Tanya. "She refused to check a bag, stood up while the seatbelt sign was on, and threatened me. I want her off." Gary looked at Tanya. He saw a crying woman and a small boy holding a book. He looked at the bag on the floor. "Ma'am," Gary said, his voice heavy. "If the flight attendant feels unsafe, I have to ask you to leave. We can rebook you on a later flight." "That's a lie," Tanya cried. "She's lying. Ask anyone." Gary sighed. He didn't want to do paperwork, but the crew's word usually overruled the passengers. "Mum, please don't make me call the police. Let's just go." Patricia crossed her arms, smug satisfaction radiating off her. "Take the boy, too. He was giving me looks." That was the breaking point. Leo unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He stood up on his seat, making him taller than the seated adults, almost eye level with Patricia. He held up his hand like a traffic cop. "Stop," Leo said. His voice wasn't a child's whine. It was projected, clear and articulate. Patricia laughed. "Sit down, little boy. I am a ticketed passenger, and according to the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, I have the right to be heard before involuntary denied boarding occurs," Leo announced. The cabin went silent. Even Gary blinked. Leo opened his binder. He didn't read from it. He glanced at it, and then looked directly at Gary. "Sir, you are the gate supervisor, correct?" Yeah, son," Gary said, taken aback. "Then you should know that under Global Airways Policy Section 14, subsection D, a flight attendant cannot demand the removal of a passenger for non-compliance regarding baggage if the baggage meets the dimensional criteria of 22x, 14x, 9 inches, which my mother's bag does." Leo pointed to the bag. "Furthermore, The flight attendant claimed my mother stood up when the seatbelt sign was on. However, the flight data recorder will show that the aircraft is still parked at the gate with the main cabin door open. According to Federal Aviation Regulation 120-317, the seatbelt sign is advisory, not mandatory, until the doors are closed and the aircraft begins pushback. Patricia's mouth opened, but no words came out. Leo wasn't done. He turned his gaze to Patricia. You also stated on the interphone that my mother threatened you. That is a serious accusation. However, there are approximately 140 witnesses on this aircraft. Under the Privacy Act of 1974 and the airline's own liability clause, if you falsify a security report to remove a paying customer, you are subject to immediate suspension, pending an internal review. He took a breath, his small chest heaving. My mother is not moving, and if you touch her or our property again without a federal marshal present, you are violating Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. The silence that followed lasted for 5 heartbeats. Then, someone in the back of the plane started clapping. The applause from the back of the plane wasn't a roar, but a smattering of defiant claps that felt like slaps to Patricia's face. She spun around, her eyes wild, scanning the rows of seated passengers. Who is clapping? This is a federal violation. Interfering with a flight crew is a felony, she shrieked, her voice cracking. The composure she had maintained for 22 years was fracturing under the pressure of a 10-year-old boy's vocabulary. Gary, the gate supervisor, looked at Leo with a mixture of shock and dawning respect. He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly regretting picking up this shift. "Look, Patricia," he muttered, lowering his voice. "The kid is right about the bag dimensions, and technically, the door is open." "I don't care what the book says," Patricia hissed, leaning into Gary's face, her mask of professionalism completely gone. "They are undermining my authority. If they stay, I don't fly. It's me or them, Gary. Make the call." It was an ultimatum, a power play. Patricia knew airlines rarely sided with passengers over crew. Crew scheduling was a nightmare. Replacing a flight attendant could delay the flight by hours. She smiled inwardly. She had won. But the commotion had breached the cockpit door. The heavy, reinforced door clicked and swung open. The hum of conversation in the cabin died instantly. Stepping out was Captain Reynolds. He was a man cut from granite. Tall, silver-haired, with the 4 gold stripes of a captain gleaming on his shoulders. He had flown combat missions before commercial jets. He didn't tolerate nonsense. He surveyed the scene over the rim of his aviator glasses. The crying mother, the red-faced flight attendant, the stunned gate agent, and the small black boy standing on seat 12A, holding a binder like it was a shield. "What on God's green earth is going on back here?" Reynolds asked. His voice was a low rumble that carried without shouting. "We're 5 minutes past pushback time." Patricia immediately rushed to him, placing a hand on his arm, playing the role of the distressed damsel. "Captain, thank goodness. These passengers in row 12, they've been abusive. The woman refused to stow her bag. She screamed at me. And her son he's shouting nonsense and inciting the other passengers. I don't feel safe working this flight with them on board." Reynolds looked at Tanya. She was wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. Then he looked at Leo. The boy hadn't sat down. He was staring at the captain with intense focus. "Is this true?" Reynolds asked Tanya. "No, sir," Tanya managed to choke out. "She took my bag. It fits. She just wants us gone." "He's lying, Captain," Patricia interjected quickly. "Gary saw it. Tell him, Gary." Gary opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Leo's voice cut through the air again. "Captain Reynolds, Leo said. He read the name off the pilot's wing pin. According to the General Operations Manual, Chapter 3, Section 2, the pilot in command has the final authority regarding the safety and operation of the aircraft, superseding all other crew members once aboard. Reynolds' eyebrows shot up. He walked down the aisle, stopping at row 12. He looked up at Leo. "You know the GOM, son?" Reynolds asked, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I know that a security threat requires a specific set of behaviors: physical violence, verbal threats of harm, or intoxication," Leo recited, not breaking eye contact. "My mother has done none of those. Patricia, however, moved a passenger's property without consent, which falls under mishandling of baggage protocols." Reynolds looked at Patricia. "Patricia, did you move the bag?" "It didn't fit," Patricia insisted. "I was trying to help." Reynolds looked up at the bin. It was closed. He reached up, unlatched it, and looked inside. Tanya's soft roller bag was sitting there, perfectly compliant, with room for a winter coat on top of it. He closed the bin. The click was loud. "It fits, Patricia," Reynolds said calmly. "Well, it didn't before," she stammered, sweat beginning to bead on her forehead. "She must have shifted it." "But that's not the point. It's her attitude. She rolled her eyes at me. And the boy, he's recording me. That's illegal." Leo held up his hands. They were empty. "I don't have a phone, Patricia. I'm 10. He's writing it down," she pointed at the binder. "He's writing down my name." "He's allowed to write, Patricia," Reynolds said, his patience thinning. "Gary, give me the manifest." Gary handed over the paperwork. Reynolds scanned it. He looked at the time. The delay was costing the airline thousands of dollars by the minute. "Here is the situation," Reynolds announced to the group, his voice stern. "The bag fits. The passengers are seated. We are leaving." "I can't!" Patricia cried out, her voice rising to a screech. "I refuse to serve this row. You have to pick, Captain. I have seniority." It was a gamble, a massive, career-ending gamble. She was betting that Reynolds wouldn't risk cancelling the flight for one family. Reynolds looked at Patricia for a long, hard moment. He saw the spite in her eyes. He saw a crew member who had lost control of herself, not the cabin. "You're giving me an ultimatum, Patricia?" Reynolds asked softly. "Yes," she said, chin up, thinking she had him cornered. "Remove them or I walk off." Reynolds nodded slowly. He turned to Gary. "Gary, call crew scheduling." Patricia smirked at Tanya. "I won," she thought. "Tell them," Reynolds continued, looking directly at Patricia, "that we need a reserve flight attendant immediately. Patricia is relieving herself of duty." The silence that fell over the cabin was absolute. Patricia's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of hollow shock. It was as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Excuse me?" Patricia stuttered. "Captain, you can't be serious. You're choosing them, over me. I've been with Global for 20 years. And in 20 years, you should have learned that we don't bully passengers," Reynolds said, his voice turning to steel. "You just issued an ultimatum to the captain. You refuse to fly. That is considered voluntary abandonment of post. You are off my manifest." "I didn't mean it like that." Patricia backpedaled, desperation clawing at her throat. She reached for Reynolds' arm again, but he stepped back. "Captain, please. I'm stressed. It's been a long month. I can fly. I'll ignore them. Let's just go." "It's too late, Patricia," Reynolds said. He gestured to the open door. "Grab your bag." "No!" she screamed. The veneer of the professional flight attendant shattered completely. "I'm not leaving. This is my plane. You!" She pointed a trembling finger at Leo. "You little brat. You ruined this. You set me up." "Hey!" The man in 12C, the one who had been sleeping earlier, finally unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. He was tall, towering over Patricia. "Don't you talk to him like that." "Sit down," Patricia yelled at the man. "No, you listen," the man said. He pulled his phone out of his suit pocket. He turned the screen toward Captain Reynolds. "Captain, my name is Mr. Henderson. I'm an attorney. I wasn't asleep. I recorded the whole thing from the moment she walked up to this row." Patricia froze. Her face drained of color. Mr. Henderson pressed play. The video was clear. It showed Patricia aggressively yanking the bag, nearly hitting Mr. Henderson. It captured her lying about the seatbelt sign. It captured her sneering, "Take the boy, too." But most damning of all, it captured her whisper to herself when she walked away to call the captain. The microphone on the phone picked up her muttering under her breath. "I'm going to teach these people a lesson they won't forget." "That's premeditated harassment," Mr. Henderson said, looking at Reynolds. "And if you want, I can airdrop this to every passenger on this plane right now." The shift in power was total. The cabin, previously fearful and quiet, erupted. "Get her off," a woman in row 15 shouted. "She was rude to me too during boarding," a man in 6A yelled. "Good job, kid," someone else cheered. Patricia looked around, spinning in a circle. The passengers she thought she ruled were now a jury, and they had found her guilty. She looked at Gary, but the gate supervisor was staring at his shoes, unwilling to associate with the sinking ship. "Patricia," Captain Reynolds said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are now disrupting a federal flight. If you do not walk off this plane in 30 seconds, I will have airport police escort you off in handcuffs. Do you understand?" Tears of rage and humiliation streamed down Patricia's face. She grabbed her purse from the galley, her movements jerky and frantic. She ripped her flight attendant's scarf from her neck, the symbol of her authority, and stuffed it into her pocket. As she started the long walk up the aisle toward the exit, she had to pass row 12 one last time. She stopped. She looked down at Tanya, who was hugging Leo tight. She wanted to say something vicious, something that would hurt them. But then she looked at Leo. The boy was calmly checking off a box on his printed checklist. He looked up, adjusted his glasses, and spoke one final fact. "Ms. Patricia," Leo said, "according to the union contract, Article 22, abandonment of a flight during boarding results in an immediate revocation of pension benefits pending investigation. You might want to call your representative." Patricia gasped. The air left her lungs. She fled. She ran out of the plane, her heels clacking frantically down the jet bridge, escaping the hundreds of eyes judging her. When she was gone, the energy in the cabin transformed. It was lighter, freer. Captain Reynolds turned to the cabin. "Folks, I apologize for the delay. We have a reserve flight attendant in the terminal who can be here in 10 minutes. We'll get you to Denver as fast as we can." He then turned to row 12. He looked at Tanya, who was still trembling slightly. "Ma'am, I am incredibly sorry for what you went through. Global Airways does not condone that behavior." "Thank you," Tanya whispered. "Thank you for listening." Reynolds looked at Leo. He extended a large, calloused hand. Leo shook it firmly. "Son," Reynolds said, a genuine smile breaking his stern face. "I've been flying for 30 years. I've never seen a first officer know the rule book better than you." "What's your name?" "Leo, sir." "Well, Leo," Reynolds said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a shiny gold metal pin. His own captain's wings, not the plastic ones they gave kids. "I think you earned these today. How would you like to come up to the cockpit and help us run the pre-flight check while we wait for the new crew member?" Leo's eyes went wide behind his glasses. The stoic mask finally dropped, replaced by the sheer wonder of a 10-year-old boy. "Really?" "Really," Reynolds said. Bring your checklist. I have a feeling you might find something I missed." As Leo unbuckled and walked toward the cockpit with the captain, the entire plane erupted into applause. Not polite clapping this time, but a thunderous ovation. Tanya buried her face in her hands, crying tears of relief. But the story wasn't over. Patricia had fled the plane, but she hadn't fled the consequences. Karma was just warming up. 35,000 feet above the American Midwest, Flight 304 had finally found a rhythm of peace. The engines hummed a steady, monotonous lullaby, a sharp contrast to the chaotic shouting match that had erupted at the gate in Dallas just an hour earlier. Sarah, the reserve flight attendant who had sprinted from the terminal to replace Patricia, moved through the cabin with a frantic sort of kindness, handing out extra pretzels and apologizing profusely to anyone who made eye contact. But while the cabin was calm, the digital world below was beginning to burn. In seat 12C, Mr. Henderson was not sleeping. He was a corporate attorney who specialized in liability law, and he knew exactly how corporations like Global Airways operated. They relied on silence. They relied on the fact that, by the time a plane landed, passengers were usually too tired or too busy to file formal complaints. They counted on the news cycle moving on. Mr. Henderson decided to ensure that didn't happen. He had purchased the high-speed in-flight Wi-Fi package before the wheels had even retracted. He sat with his phone in his lap, reviewing the footage he had captured. It was perfect. The framing was undeniable. The audio was crisp. It showed the sneer on Patricia's face, the trembling of Tanya's hands, and the steely resolve of 10-year-old Leo. He opened Twitter, then TikTok, then Instagram. He wasn't just posting a video, he was lighting a fuse. He typed the caption carefully, knowing the algorithm favored outrage and justice. Global Airways flight attendant tries to kick off a single mum for no reason. Then this 10-year-old genius pulls out the rulebook and ends her career. Watch until the end. Global Airways. Justice for Leo. Flight 304. Know your rights. He hit post. "Godspeed, kid," Henderson whispered to himself, glancing at the small boy in 12A, who was currently highlighting a section of the FAA Passenger Bill of Rights with a yellow marker, completely unaware that he was about to become the most famous child in America. 500 miles away, inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit crew lounge at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, Patricia was trying to spin her own narrative. She sat in a corner booth, nursing a lukewarm ginger ale, holding an ice pack to her forehead. She felt a mixture of adrenaline and nausea. She had already convinced herself that she was the victim. In her mind, the events of the last hour had warped. The boy hadn't been quoting policy. He had been insubordinate. The mother hadn't been crying. She had been aggressive. She dialed a number she had memorized 2 decades ago. "Frank? It's Patricia," she said, her voice cracking theatrically. "I need you." It happened again. But this time the captain didn't back me up. Frank, the local union representative, sighed on the other end of the line. "What happened, Patty? I'm looking at the report Captain Reynolds just filed. It says, abandonment of post. That's serious. That's termination territory." "He's lying," Patricia hissed, looking around to make sure no other flight attendants were listening. "It was a hostile work environment, Frank. The passengers in row 12, they were a mob. The mother was screaming at me over a bag that clearly didn't fit. And the kid, he was filming me. He was shouting statutes at me. I felt unsafe. I had to remove myself from the situation for my own mental health." "Okay, slow down," Frank said, his voice cautious. "If you felt threatened, we can file a grievance. We can claim you were exercising your right to refuse unsafe work. But Patricia, is there any proof? Witnesses?" "The whole plane saw it," she lied, desperation clawing at her throat. "But they were all on the passenger's side. You know how it is these days. Everyone hates us. I just need you to protect my pension. I've got 3 years left, Frank. Don't let them take it." "Go home," Frank instructed. "Write a statement, detailed, every threat they made. Don't look at social media. Just go home, have a glass of wine, and we'll deal with management in the morning. I'll try to kill the story before it gets to HR." Patricia hung up, feeling a flicker of triumph. She could fix this. She was a veteran. She knew the system better than anyone. Frank would bury the captain's report in red tape. She would take a month of stress leave, and eventually, she would be back in the sky. She gathered her purse and walked out of the lounge, head held high, ignoring the glances of the gate agents she passed. She walked to the employee parking lot, the humid Dallas air hitting her face. She reached her car, tossed her bag into the passenger seat, and turned the ignition. Then she turned on her phone. It didn't just ping, it screamed. The phone vibrated so violently in her hand it almost fell. A cascade of notifications flooded the screen, scrolling faster than she could read. Text messages from numbers she hadn't heard from in years. Emails, Facebook tags, TikTok alerts. Ping, ping, ping. Her sister sent a text. "Patty, please tell me this isn't you. It's on CNN." Patricia's blood ran cold. CNN. She opened the link her sister had sent. It wasn't CNN. It was a retweet from a major news anchor sharing Mr. Henderson's video. Views, 2.4 million. Retweets, 85,000. She clicked play. The video was unflinching. It was high definition. There was no hostile mob. There was no screaming mother. There was just her, cruel, petty, power-hungry. "Take the boy, too," she heard her own voice sneer from the tiny speakers. It sounded demonic. She scrolled down to the comments. This was the mistake that broke her. User 928. "I recognize her. That's Patricia from DFW. She made my autistic son cry last year because he dropped a cracker. She's a monster." Frequent flyer Mike. "I've avoided Global Airways for years because of a flight attendant who looks exactly like this. Glad she's finally being exposed." Lawyer up. "That kid is a hero. Section 242 deprivation of rights? She just walked into a federal crime. She won't just lose her job. She's going to lose her pension." Sarah. "Look at her face when the captain walks out. She thought she owned that plane. Karma is coming." Patricia dropped the phone onto the floor mat. She couldn't breathe. The narrative she had built, the fortress of lies she had constructed for Frank, had been nuked from orbit. The world didn't see a victim. They saw a bully with a badge. She slumped over the steering wheel, the sounds of the distant runway mocking her. She had wanted power. Now, she was the most hated woman in the sky. Back on Flight 304, the descent into Denver had begun. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. Tanya looked out the window at the snow-capped Rockies, clutching Leo's hand. She was still shaking slightly, the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly fading into a dull ache of anxiety. She didn't know about the video. All she knew was that she had barely escaped being thrown off a plane, and she was worried about what would happen when they landed. Would police be waiting? Would Global Airways try to sue her? "Mum," Leo whispered, pointing at the wing flaps. Flaps set to 30 degrees. Landing gear deployment in T-2 minutes. "You're doing great, baby." She smiled weakly. The wheels touched the tarmac with a screech of rubber, and the plane roared in reverse thrust. As the aircraft slowed to a taxi, the distinct sound of cellular data reconnecting filled the cabin. Ding-ding, chirp, buzz. Suddenly, heads started turning. A teenager in row 14 stood up to get his bag, checked his phone, and audibly gasped. He looked at his screen, then looked at the back of Leo's head, then back at the screen. "No way," the teenager whispered. "Dude, that's him." "That's who?" his friend asked. "The kid, the viral kid. He's sitting right there." Tanya frowned, looking around. Why were people pointing? Her own phone rang. It wasn't a text. It was a call from an unknown number with a New York area code. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Is this Tanya Davis?" A woman's voice on the other end sounded breathless, frantic, and terrified. "Yes. Who is this?" "Ms. Davis, my name is Elena. I am the Senior Vice President of Communications for Global Airways. I am calling you personally to offer our most sincere, profound apologies for the incident on Flight 304. Tanya stiffened. "How do you know who I am? We haven't even gotten off the plane. Ms. Davis, the incident has come to our attention via social media," Elena stammered. "We have seen the footage. The behavior of that crew member was abhorrent. It does not reflect our values. The CEO is personally reviewing the matter." Elena took a breath, and Tanya could practically hear the rustle of a checkbook opening. "We want to make this right immediately. We have authorized a full refund of your tickets. We are issuing you $5,000 in travel vouchers, and we would like to arrange for a private car to take you to your destination in Denver, and first-class tickets for your return trip. We just ask that you please coordinate with us before speaking to any media outlets." Tanya looked at Leo. He was calmly packing his binder into his backpack, making sure the edges of the papers didn't curl. He hadn't done this for money. He hadn't done this for fame. He had done it because it was right. A fire ignited in Tanya's chest. "Elena," Tanya said, her voice loud enough that the passengers in row 11 turned to listen. "I don't want your vouchers." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Ms. Davis, please, we just want to—" "I don't want your money," Tanya repeated, her voice trembling with dignity. "I want to know that woman will never be able to do that to another child again. My son memorized your rule book because he was afraid of people like her. I don't want a private car. I want justice." She hung up. The plane had stopped at the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off. As Tanya and Leo stood up to retrieve the bag that had started a war, the cabin didn't rush to deplane. Usually it was a stampede. Today, people waited. Mr. Henderson, the attorney in 12C, stood up and stepped into the aisle. He looked at Leo. "You did good, son," Henderson said loud and clear. And then someone in the back started clapping. It wasn't the polite golf clap from earlier. It was a roar. It spread from row 30 up to row 1. People were cheering. "Way to go, Mum! You showed her, kid." Leo looked around, eyes wide behind his thick glasses, completely confused. He gripped his backpack straps tight. "Mum," he whispered, "why are they clapping? We just arrived on schedule." Tanya grabbed her bag and took his hand, leading him into the aisle. She looked at the faces of the strangers who had become their witnesses, their defenders. "Because, Leo," Tanya said, wiping a fresh tear from her cheek, "sometimes doing the right thing makes a lot of noise." They walked out of the jet bridge and into the terminal. But they weren't just passengers anymore. As they stepped into the airport, heads turned. People who had been glued to their phones in the waiting area looked up, recognized the boy from the video, and pointed. The viral storm had made landfall, and for the first time in a long time, the good guys were winning. The air inside the executive conference room on the 42nd floor of Global Airways headquarters in Chicago was not just cold. It was sterile, breathless, and terrifyingly silent. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline was grey and imposing, but inside the atmosphere was heavy with impending doom. Patricia sat at the far end of a long, polished mahogany table. She had spent 2 hours that morning curating her appearance. Gone was the severe bun and the sharp red lipstick. She wore a soft, oatmeal-colored cardigan and kept her hair loose, trying to project an image of fragility, of a woman pushed to the brink by exhaustion. She wanted them to see a victim, not a villain. Next to her sat Frank, her union representative. He was a man known for fighting tooth and nail for his crew members, but today he looked pale. He hadn't opened his briefcase. He stared at the table, refusing to meet Patricia's eyes. Across from them sat the tribunal. There was Eleanor, the director of in-flight services, a woman who had started as a flight attendant 30 years ago and had zero tolerance for incompetence. To her right was Marcus, the head of human resources, and to her left, the person who made Patricia's hands tremble in her lap, was Richard, the general counsel for the entire airline. On the massive 80-inch screen mounted on the wall, the video was paused. It was a freeze frame of Patricia's face, contorted in rage, her finger pointing accusingly at a 10-year-old boy. "Patricia," Eleanor began. Her voice was quiet, devoid of the warmth she usually reserved for senior crew. "We have watched this footage 20 times this morning. We have read the reports from the gate supervisor. We have the transcript from the cockpit voice recorder, where Captain Reynolds notes your refusal to fly." She leaned forward, clasping her hands. "In 22 years, I have never seen a more flagrant, destructive violation of our core values. You didn't just break protocol, Patricia. You declared war on a passenger." Patricia swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had rehearsed her defense 1,000 times in the shower. "Eleanor, please, you have to understand the context," she said, her voice raspy and trembling. "I've been flying 6 legs a week. I'm going through a messy divorce. I haven't been sleeping. I didn't mean to snap. I felt threatened. The passenger was aggressive regarding the bag, and I just wanted to ensure safety." "Threatened?" Richard, the general counsel, spoke for the first time. His voice was like grinding stones. He slid a thick file across the sleek table. "The passenger was a single mother holding a sweater. The aggressor was a child reading a PDF document. You weren't threatened, Patricia. You were challenged, and you responded by trying to weaponize your authority." "I can take anger management classes," Patricia pleaded, tears starting to well up, tears she hoped would garner sympathy. "I'll take a suspension. Put me on probation. I've given this company my life. You can't just throw me away because of one bad day." "This isn't about one bad day," Richard countered, opening the file. "This is about liability. Do you have any idea what you've done? You attempted to utilize the Patriot Act's security protocols to remove a black family from a commercial flight without cause. You fabricated a security threat. That is a federal crime." Patricia looked to Frank, desperate for him to jump in, to cite a union clause, to save her. Frank finally looked up, his eyes sad and resigned. "I can't fight this, Patty. I can't grieve this. You lied to me on the phone. You told me the man in 12C was physically intimidating you. The video shows he was asleep until you woke him up screaming. The union cannot defend willful misconduct verified by video evidence. He provoked me," Patricia snapped, the mask of the victim slipping for a split second, revealing the anger underneath. "That brat! He was quoting the law at me like he owned the plane. He humiliated me. He saved us," Marcus, the head of HR, cut in sharply. "That boy is the only reason we aren't facing a $50 million discrimination lawsuit right now. He gave you 10 distinct opportunities to de-escalate. He cited the policy that you are paid to know. If you had succeeded in dragging them off that plane, this airline would be facing a boycott that could bankrupt us." You are a liability, Patricia. A massive, radioactive liability. The room fell silent again. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar in Patricia's ears. Eleanor stood up. The movement was final. Patricia, effective immediately, your employment with Global Airways is terminated for cause. This falls under gross misconduct. This means you are ineligible for your severance package. You will not receive the golden handshake. My pension? Patricia whispered, the blood draining from her face. I'm 3 years away from full benefits. You can't touch my pension. Actually, Richard said, closing the file with a heavy thud. Since your actions involved the willful falsification of a federal security report, the board has voted to freeze your benefits, pending the outcome of the FAA investigation. If they find you criminally liable for interfering with a flight crew, which they likely will, you will lose it all. Patricia stood up, her legs shaking so badly she nearly collapsed. This is my life. I am a senior attendant. Not anymore, Eleanor said coldly. Hand over your badge and your ID. Patricia looked down at her purse. With trembling fingers, she unclipped the plastic ID she had worn for 2 decades. The photo on it was from 20 years ago, when she was young and hopeful, before the bitterness had taken root. She placed it on the mahogany table. It made a hollow clack. Security is waiting outside, Marcus said, not looking at her. They will escort you to your car. Do not speak to any employees on your way out. Patricia walked out of the boardroom, clutching a cardboard box containing a coffee mug and a few photos. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral march. She passed flight attendants she knew, pilots she had flown with. No one made eye contact. They all knew. She was a pariah. She walked out into the biting Chicago wind, stripped of her uniform, her status, and her future. The power she had abused was gone, and the silence of the city swallowed her whole. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport felt entirely different for Tanya and Leo. The humidity was gone, replaced by a crisp, cool morning. They approached the gate for their return flight. Tanya gripped the handle of her roller bag, the same bag that had started it all. She approached the podium hesitantly, expecting a fight. "Ms. Davis?" the gate agent asked. She was a young woman with a bright smile. "We've been expecting you." The machine didn't make the harsh buzz of an economy ticket. It gave a melodic, golden chime. "Captain Reynolds is flying this leg today," the agent whispered, leaning over the counter. "He personally requested that your seats be upgraded." She handed over 2 boarding passes. They weren't the flimsy thermal paper. They were heavy cardstock, stamped in bold letters. "Class first." "Have a wonderful flight," the agent said. When they boarded, they didn't have to shuffle past rows of judging eyes. They turned left. The first-class cabin was soft, quiet, and smelled of lavender and warm towels. Patricia wasn't there. In her place was Chloe, a flight attendant who radiated genuine warmth. "Welcome aboard, Leo," Chloe said, taking his backpack. "I hear you're the expert on the 737-800. The captain told us all about you." Leo smiled, adjusting his glasses, his chest swelling with pride. "Yes, ma'am. I've been studying the descent protocols." "Well," Chloe winked, "Captain Reynolds wants to know if you'd like to help us with the mid-flight announcement today. He thinks the passengers would appreciate hearing from a pro." Leo's jaw dropped. He looked at his mother. Tanya nodded, tears of joy shining in her eyes. An hour into the flight, the intercom clicked on. The cabin went silent. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," a young, clear, and articulate voice announced over the speakers. "This is your junior first officer speaking from the flight deck. We are currently cruising at 36,000 feet. The weather in Dallas is a perfect 75 degrees. Please keep your seatbelts fastened as per Federal Aviation Regulation 121.317, and thank you for flying Global Airways, where we follow the rules. Tanya sat back in her wide leather seat, sipping sparkling cider, listening to her son's voice echo through the plane. She looked out the window at the endless horizon. The nightmare was over. The bully had been vanquished by the very book she tried to ignore. And Leo? Leo was just getting started. Patricia thought she was the law, but she forgot that authority without integrity is just bullying. She lost her job, her pension, and her reputation because she underestimated a mother's love and a boy's intelligence. It's a harsh reminder that in the age of smartphones, the truth always comes out. What do you think? Was Patricia's punishment fair, or should she have faced jail time for trying to falsify a security threat? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed seeing the little guy win, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.